We're going to start this puppy up. Clear? Prop.
And welcome back to Building the Affordaplane. This week we're going to be attaching our ribs to the front and rear spars. And we're going to do that using small metal gussets that we're going to create. We're going to create them out of sheet aluminum. 20 to 25 thousandths is perfect, readily available, 6061 aluminum sheet. And we're going to cut them out with our snips, drill the holes, and that way we can attach them both to the rib itself and then to the spar. This makes for a very strong connection, uses a few rivets, the sheet metal. We don't need any specialty products to do this. And what I'm going to show you is one way that worked for me. You can modify this technique any way you feel that you would like. So let's get started making these gussets.
Now here's how I created the gussets. This is a piece of 0.20 or 0.25 thousandths, and then 2.5 inches from top to bottom, and each base was 2 inches. We're going to cut these out. Now you can mark the holes either before or after, and once you mark the holes and drill them out, you can use that as a template for each one so you don't have to keep doing your measurements. But basically 1/4 inch up for the 2 lower holes, and then 1/2 inch in, and then 2 holes down the center, 3/4 down, and then 1.5 inches. So let's mark the holes and drill them on one of these. And here's one after I drilled the holes. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but the idea is at least 1/4 inch up from the edge and 1/2 inch in, and the same with the top. This hole's about 1 3/4 inches up from the bottom, and then 1/2 inch or more for the second one. And then we'll cut these out and try and fit them up to a rib. And just as a little tip, notice how in this gusset I snipped off each of the 3 corner tips. By doing that, it makes it much faster to round off the corners on your Scotch-Brite wheel, because you've eliminated a piece that doesn't have to be ground down. And of course, when you're all done, you get something nice and round like this. In order to make it easy to drill the gussets onto the rib tips, I've created this little jig here. This is nothing more than a piece of wood with 2 blocks, and the blocks are just high enough to be even with the top of the tube. So by inserting a tube inside of here, and I got this angled so that the other end would sit on the floor, and it's important to keep everything straight, and that's easy to see. And now we can focus on getting our gusset into place, and this will sit flat while we drill and mark it. Now I have marked mine 1.5 inches up from the very tip, and that's roughly a good distance for my gusset to sit so that the 2 holes get into the center there. Now I'm going to mark the center by scratching the top. If you keep this parallel to the surface, you'll be able to see the line, the scratch line through it. And the idea is to place this here, find the center line. I'm going to mark the first hole, drill and cleco, and then mark the second hole. And that's where they'll sit on the tube. So I'll go ahead and do the first one and then drill, and then we will rivet this on so that this is easier to install on our spar with the gusset already attached. And then we'll repeat with the tail end of our rib. And now we can take this over to the spar and see how it fits. Now we have the rib inverted or switched around so that we are now going to work on the tail end of the rib. And using the exact same jig, we're going to place it in here and then put our gusset on top. So here I'm using the same gusset we used at the front of the rib, and about 1.5 inches up from the tip. Now your mileage may vary depending on how you make your gussets, but we can always adjust it for the next rib, but I'm going to try it here. Again, finding the center line and marking and carefully drilling the 2 holes and riveting, and then we'll take this rib up for fitting, see how nice it fits. And let's go take this up to the wing. Now, I have this temporarily in position with a clamp because I don't have 3 hands to hold everything. Can you imagine if we had 3 hands? Now, here's what it looks like on the back side. It's a very nice fit to the spar. And of course, we will drill and rivet into the spar at the proper locations. This is just for fitting purposes at this time. And let's go back to the rear. And a pretty good fit to the rear spar. And we will drill and rivet through these holes here. So all in all, not too bad. Obviously there is no perfect fit, but you're going for the best you can. And also you want to make sure that when setting these up that you have the rib vertical to the spar. And we can do that once we get this on a table. We're just doing this for fitting purposes. So we'll take one more look at the gussets on the ribs to give you an idea of what we're after. And here is the front gusset. And here is a picture of the rear gusset. We're both, the gussets are the same for the front and the rear. Since you have so many gussets to make, after sketching them out, and once you've got the hole pattern the way you like it, I took a thicker piece of aluminum and use that as a stencil to be able to mark all of the holes very quickly, so that you only have to measure once and then just copy them over and over. So we have a total of 20 ribs, 2 gussets per rib, so we need 40 of these. That's a fun task.
After building enough ribs for one wing, it's time to mark the locations and get them installed. Now, with the wing on our bench, we're ready to start laying out the locations for each of the ribs. And that's done very easily by marking. Now, the very first rib location is to be 2.5 inches from the inboard. Now, I'm looking at the main spar here. That's the first rib. We have a total of 10 ribs. So the next 9 ribs are to be located, and basically we're taking the full length and dividing it by the 9 remaining ribs. But each rib will be separated from the previous one by 15 3/4 inches. And if we follow that rule, we're going to go down and just keep marking them all the way to the end. And what we should find is that this is rib number 9, and rib number 10 will come out to the end. And in fact, you should be off by 1/4 inch if you measure real accurately. I don't necessarily measure real accurately, so it's awful close to 15 3/4 inches for the very last one. So we will include one more right at the end here. We need to repeat this on the other spar. So we'll simply go up to our rear spar. Now our wing, of course, is face up in this example. How do I know that? Remember, our nuts are up so that our bolt heads are on the bottom, so the fabric doesn't get poked by them. And the same thing, our first mark, 2.5 inches in, and then every 15 3/4 inches to the next one. And you may note that on my marks I drew quite a long line there, and I just used a piece of thin aluminum and with my marker followed it around. The reason I did this is that may be helpful when you go to locate a rib and you can find the center. So either mark it down here, but make sure you can see where the center is located for lining these things up here. Now let's go to our first position and install one of these ribs. So that would be back over at our very first rib location near the root of the wing. Now you should also notice that I used a square, assuming you've lined up your spar even with the table, and by positioning my square with the table and in line with my mark, I was able to draw a line on the table that is right in line with my line on the spar. And that's this line here. Now, the reason for that will become apparent in a moment. But as you move from station to station, rib to rib, draw that line out so that it is perpendicular and in line with the rib line. Now, since we have pre-installed the gussets, we can insert one here, install one, and also notice that I have marked the center of the gusset so that it's very easy to tell where it's located. And the reason I did this is notice that
you're never sure exactly when the rib is even with the spar. So by taking a square like this and putting it on the line you drew on the table, over here, I can move the square up to that line, and when the rib touches, so to speak, up here, we know that we have the rib perpendicular to our spar. So just a very easy check for that. And while it is perpendicular, we want to mark the 2 holes in our gusset down here for drilling. And of course, we can look behind the gusset to make sure we have the base of the rib sitting on it nicely. But keeping it square, I'm going to mark with my marker the 2 holes and then punch them and cleco in place. And to be absolutely accurate, we should really move our square over half the thickness of the rib, because that line's on the center of the rib, and if we want the rib to touch the edge, we need to move the rib back, the square back this way, half the thickness, to get it absolutely accurate. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and mark my holes after making sure everything is nice and lined up. So I can go ahead now, punch and drill these 2 holes. I'll do one, cleco it, and then drill through this hole to get an exact fit. And we have the first hole drilled. Put that in place. Now we have one more chance to verify our squareness and double check, and we can go ahead now and drill that hole there. Good, nice. Now we can go to the rear and tackle the gusset down there. Now this one's going to be even easier. We're going to line up a center line on our gusset with our mark, and we can then mark and drill and cleco these. And there's our rear rib gusset. And that's what it looks like underneath. Let's go check out the front, and then we'll be ready to rivet. And there's the back end of the front. So we got a nice fit at the front and the back. We can now rivet those in place. And then move on to the next. And there's the rear. And here's the front. And here's a side shot. And that shows the nice fit with the spar. Now we will continue. We only have 9 more to go. And we're about halfway done. We'll keep on trucking until we finish. Another strategy for installing the rear gusset is to do it after you've put the rib onto the spar. I have the front gusset in place for this rib and clecoed, and now I can mark and drill this one on both the rib and the spar in place right now. Your choice. And the wing with all of its ribs installed. And at the end, our last rib was placed as far to the right as it could go. And there you have it. Now don't forget about your second wing. Plane needs both wings to fly, so we have some more ribs to put on. And then after that, what do we have left? Well, actually quite a bit. We have to work on our elevator, get that hooked up properly with the stick and the push-pull tube that goes with that. And then we have our down tubes. What are down tubes? Oh, we'll look at that. They're part of the fuselage. And then don't forget, we need to attach the wings to the fuselage, so we need some brackets for that. So stay tuned, and we got more coming next time. The only way we're going to make progress, of course, you know the routine, back to building.